Chapter 11, The Camel Trader of Babylon. The hungrier you become, the clearer your mind works, and the more sensitive you become to the smell of food. Tarkad, the son of Azure, certainly thought so. For 2 whole days, he hadn't eaten anything except 2 small figs he stole from a garden wall. He couldn't grab another before an angry woman rushed out and chased him down the street. Her shrill cries were still ringing in his ears as he walked through the marketplace. The memory of her voice helped him stop his restless fingers from snatching tempting fruit from the market women's baskets. Never before had he realized how much food was brought to the markets of Babylon, or how good it smelled. Leaving the market, he walked across to the inn and paced back and forth in front of the eating house. Perhaps here he might meet someone he knew. He hoped to find someone who could lend him a copper coin. That single coin would win him a smile from the unfriendly innkeeper and a generous helping of food. Without the copper, he knew all too well how unwelcome he would be. Lost in thought, he unexpectedly found himself face to face with the one man he wished most to avoid. It was the tall, bony figure of Dabasir, the camel trader. Of all the friends and acquaintances from whom he had borrowed small amounts of money, Dabasir made him feel the most uncomfortable. This was because Tarkad had failed to keep his promises to repay the money promptly. Dabasir's face lit up when he saw him.
Ah! It is Tarkad. You are exactly the person I've been looking for. I want you to repay the 2 copper coins I lent you a month ago. I also want the silver coin I lent you before that. We are lucky to meet today. I can really use those coins right now. What do you say, boy? What do you say?
Tarkad stuttered and his face flushed red. He had nothing in his empty stomach to give him the courage to argue with the outspoken Dabasir.
I am sorry, very sorry.
He mumbled weakly.
But today I don't have the copper or the silver to repay you. Then get it.
Dabasir insisted.
Surely you can get your hands on a few coppers and a piece of silver. You need to repay the generosity of your father's old friend who helped you when you were in need. It is because bad luck follows me that I cannot pay. Bad luck? Would you blame the gods for your own weakness? Bad luck chases every man who thinks more about borrowing than repaying. Come with me, boy, while I eat. I am hungry, and I want to tell you a story.
Tarkad flinched from Dabasir's brutal honesty. However, this was at least an invitation to enter the coveted doorway of the eating house. Dabasir pushed him to a far corner of the room, where they sat down on small rugs. When Kauskor, the proprietor, appeared with a smile, Dabasir addressed him with his usual casual manner.
Fat lizard of the desert, bring me a leg of goat, browned with plenty of juice. Bring bread and all the vegetables, because I am hungry and want a lot of food. Don't forget my friend here. Bring him a jug of water. Make sure it is cold, because it is a hot day.
Tarkad's heart sank. Did he have to sit here and drink water while watching this man eat an entire goat leg? He said nothing. He couldn't think of anything to say. Dabasir, however, didn't know how to stay quiet. Smiling and waving good-naturedly to the other customers, who all knew him, he continued talking.
I heard a story from a traveler who just returned from Urfa. He spoke of a rich man who owns a piece of stone cut so thin that you can look right through it. He put it in the window of his house to keep out the rain. The traveler said the stone is yellow. When he was allowed to look through it, the entire outside world looked strange and different from reality. What do you say to that, Tarkad? Do you think the whole world could look like a completely different color to a man? I suppose it could.
The young man replied. But Tarkad was much more interested in the fat goat leg that had just been placed in front of Dabasir.
Well, I know it is true because I myself have seen the world in a completely different color from what it really is. The story I am about to tell you is about how I managed to see the world in its true colors once again. Dabasir is going to tell a story.
A nearby diner whispered to his neighbor, dragging his rug closer. Other diners brought their food and crowded around in a semicircle. They chewed loudly in Tarkad's ears and brushed against him with their meaty bones. Tarkad was the only one without food. Dabasir didn't offer to share with him. He didn't even point to a small piece of hard bread that had broken off the platter and fallen to the floor.
The story I am about to tell,
began Dabasir, pausing to bite a huge chunk of meat from the goat leg,
is about my early life and how I became a camel trader. Did anyone here know that I was once a slave in Syria?
A murmur of surprise rippled through the audience. Dabasir listened to it with satisfaction.
When I was a young man,
Dabasir continued, after another fierce bite of the goat leg,
I learned my father's trade of saddle making. I worked with him in his shop and got married. Because I was young and not very skilled, I earned very little. It was barely enough to support my wonderful wife in a modest way. I wanted nice things that I couldn't afford. Soon, I discovered that shopkeepers would let me buy things on credit, trusting me to pay them back later even if I didn't have the money at the time. Being young and inexperienced, I didn't realize the danger. A person who spends more than he earns is planting the seeds of unnecessary self-indulgence, and he is guaranteed to harvest a storm of trouble and humiliation. So, I gave in to my desires for fine clothing. I bought luxury items for my good wife and our home that we simply couldn't afford. I paid what I could, and for a while, everything was fine. But eventually, I realized I couldn't stretch my earnings to cover both my living expenses and my debts. Creditors began chasing me down, demanding payment for my extravagant purchases. My life became miserable. I borrowed from my friends, but I couldn't repay them either. Things went from bad to worse. My wife went back to live with her father. I decided to leave Babylon and look for a new city where a young man might have better opportunities. For 2 years, I lived a restless and unsuccessful life, working for caravan traders. Then, I fell in with a group of likable robbers who roamed the desert, attacking unarmed caravans. Such actions were completely beneath the son of my honorable father. But I was seeing the world through a colored stone, and I didn't realize how far I had fallen. We were successful on our first trip. We captured a rich haul of gold, silks, and valuable merchandise. We took this loot to Janir and quickly wasted it all. The second time, we weren't so lucky. Right after we had captured a caravan, we were attacked by the spearmen of a local tribal chief. The caravans paid him for protection. Our 2 leaders were killed, and the rest of us were taken to Damascus. There, they stripped us of our clothing and sold us as slaves. I was bought for 2 silver coins by a Syrian desert chief. With my hair shaved off and wearing nothing but a loincloth, I didn't look any different from the other slaves. Because I was a reckless young man, I thought it was just an adventure. That changed when my master brought me before his 4 wives and told them they could have me as a eunuch. Then, I truly realized the complete hopelessness of my situation. These desert men were fierce warriors. I was completely at their mercy, with no weapons and no way to escape. I stood there in fear as those 4 women looked me over. I wondered if I could expect any pity from them. Sirah, the first wife, was older than the rest. Her face showed no emotion as she stared at me. I looked away from her, finding little comfort. The next wife was an arrogant beauty who looked at me as if I were a worm in the dirt. The 2 younger wives giggled, acting like the whole situation was an exciting joke. It felt like an eternity as I stood there waiting for my sentence. Each woman seemed to want the others to decide. Finally, Sirah spoke up in a cold voice. We have plenty of eunuchs, she said, but we have very few camel tenders, and the ones we do have are worthless. Even today, I need to visit my mother who is sick with a fever, and there is no slave I trust to lead my camel. Ask this slave if he knows how to lead a camel. My master immediately asked me, "What do you know about camels?" Trying hard to hide my desperate eagerness, I answered, "I can make them kneel. I can load them with cargo. I can lead them on long trips without letting them get tired. If necessary, I can even fix their saddles and gear." The slave speaks confidently enough, my master observed. If you want, Sirrah, you can take this man to be your camel tender. So, I was handed over to Sirrah. That very day, I led her camel on a long journey to visit her sick mother. I took the opportunity to thank her for saving me. I also told her that I wasn't born a slave, but that I was the son of a free man, a respected saddle maker in Babylon. I explained a lot of my story to her. Her response really caught me off guard, and I thought about her words for a long time afterward. How can you call yourself a free man when your own weakness brought you to this point? She asked. If a man has the soul of a slave inside him, won't he eventually become a slave no matter how he was born, just as water always seeks its own level? And if a man has the soul of a free man inside him, won't he eventually become respected and honored in his own city, no matter what bad luck he faces? For over a year, I was a slave and lived among the slaves, but I couldn't bring myself to act like one of them. One day, Sirrah asked me, in the evening, when the other slaves socialize and enjoy each other's company, "Why do you always sit alone in your tent?" I answered her, "I am still thinking about what you told me. I am wondering if I truly have the soul of a slave. Because I feel different from them, I can't join them, so I have to sit by myself." I have to sit by myself, too, she confessed. My dowry was very large, and my husband only married me because of the money. He doesn't actually want me. But what every woman truly wants is to be desired. Because he doesn't want me, and because I haven't been able to have any children, I must sit alone. If I were a man, I would rather die than be a slave like this. But the traditions of our tribe force women into slavery. What do you think of me by now? I suddenly asked her. Do I have the soul of a man, or do I have the soul of a slave? Do you have a desire to repay the fair debts you owe in Babylon? She parried. Yes, I have the desire, but I see no way. If you contentedly let the years slip by and make no effort to repay, then you have nothing but the shameful soul of a slave. No man is anything else if he cannot respect himself, and no man can respect himself if he does not repay his honest debts. But what can I do when I am just a slave in Syria? Then stay a slave in Syria, you weakling. I am not a weakling, I denied hotly. Then prove it. How? Doesn't your great king fight his enemies in every way he can and with every force he has? Your debts are your enemies. They ran you out of Babylon. You left them alone, and they grew too strong for you. If you had fought them like a man, you could have conquered them and been honored among the townspeople. But you did not have the soul to fight them. Look how your pride has gone down, until you are now a slave in Syria. I thought a lot about her unkind accusations. I prepared many defensive phrases to prove that I was not a slave at heart. However, I never got the chance to use them. 3 days later, Sirrah's maid took me to see her mistress. My mother is very sick again, she said. Saddle the 2 best camels in my husband's herd. Tie on water skins and saddlebags for a long journey. The maid will give you food at the kitchen tent. I packed the camels, wondering a great deal about the large amount of provisions the maid provided. After all, her mother lived less than a day's journey away. The maid rode the rear camel that followed us, and I led the camel of my mistress. It was just getting dark when we reached her mother's house. Sirrah dismissed the maid and said to me, Dabasir, do you have the soul of a free man or the soul of a slave? The soul of a free man, I insisted. Now is your chance to prove it. Your master has been drinking heavily, and his chiefs are in a stupor. Take these camels and make your escape. Here in this bag are some of your master's clothes to disguise yourself. I will say that you stole the camels and ran away while I was visiting my sick mother. You have the soul of a queen, I told her. I wish very much that I could lead you to happiness. Happiness does not await a runaway wife who seeks it in far lands among strange people, she responded. Go your own way. May the gods of the desert protect you, because the journey is long and completely barren of food or water. I needed no further urging. I thanked her warmly and hurried away into the night. I did not know this strange country, and I only had a dim idea of the direction toward Babylon. Still, I struck out bravely across the desert toward the hills. I rode one camel and led the other. I traveled all that night and all the next day. I was urged on by the knowledge of the terrible fate that awaited slaves who stole their master's property and tried to escape. Late that afternoon, I reached a rough country that was just as uninhabitable as the desert. The sharp rocks bruised the feet of my faithful camels, and soon they were picking their way slowly and painfully. I met neither man nor beast along the way, and I could well understand why they avoided this inhospitable land. From then on, it was a journey that very few men ever lived to talk about. We plodded along day after day. Our food and water ran out. The heat of the sun was merciless. At the end of the 9th day, I slid from the back of my camel. I felt that I was too weak to ever remount, and I was certain I would die lost in this abandoned country. I stretched out upon the ground and slept. I did not wake up until the very first gleam of daylight. I sat up and looked around. There was a refreshing coolness in the morning air. My camels lay dejected not far away. All around me was a vast wasteland of broken country covered with rock, sand, and thorny bushes. There was no sign of water, and absolutely nothing for a man or a camel to eat. Could it be that I was facing my end in this peaceful quiet? My mind was clearer than it had ever been before. My body now seemed to be of very little importance. My parched and bleeding lips, my dry and swollen tongue, and my empty stomach had all lost their supreme agonies from the day before. I looked across into the uninviting distance, and once again the question came to me. Do I have the soul of a slave or the soul of a free man? Then, with perfect clarity, I realized something. If I had the soul of a slave, I should just give up, lie down in the desert, and die. That would be a fitting end for a runaway slave. But if I had the soul of a free man, what then? Surely I would force my way back to Babylon. I would repay the people who had trusted me. I would bring happiness to my wife who truly loved me, and I would bring peace and contentment to my parents. Your debts are your enemies who have run you out of Babylon, Sirrah had said. Yes, it was true. Why had I refused to stand my ground like a man? Why had I allowed my wife to go back to her father? Then a strange thing happened. The whole world seemed to be a different color. It felt as though I had been looking at it through a colored stone that was suddenly taken away. At last, I saw the true values in life. Die in the desert? Not me. With a new vision, I saw exactly what I needed to do. First, I would go back to Babylon and face every man to whom I owed an unpaid debt. I would tell them that after years of wandering and misfortune, I had come back to pay my debts as fast as the gods would allow. Next, I would make a home for my wife, and I would become a citizen that my parents could be proud of. My debts were my enemies, but the men I owed were my friends. They were my friends because they had trusted me and believed in me. I staggered weakly to my feet. What did hunger matter? What did thirst matter? They were just minor incidents on the road to Babylon. The soul of a free man surged within me. I was going back to conquer my enemies and reward my friends. I thrilled with this great resolve. The glazed eyes of my camels brightened at the new tone in my husky voice. After many attempts and with great effort, they finally got to their feet. With pitiful perseverance, they pushed on toward the north. Something deep inside me said that we would find Babylon there. We found water. We passed into a more fertile country filled with grass and fruit. We eventually found the trail to Babylon. We found it because the soul of a free man looks at life as a series of problems to be solved, and then solves them. Meanwhile, the soul of a slave simply whines, "What can I do when I am just a slave?" How about you, Tarkad? Does your empty stomach make your head exceptionally clear? Are you ready to take the road that leads back to self-respect? Can you see the world in its true colors? Do you have the desire to pay your honest debts, no matter how many there may be? Do you want to once again be a man respected in Babylon?
Moisture came to the eyes of the youth. He rose eagerly to his knees.
You have shown me a vision. I already feel the soul of a free man surging within me. But how did things go for you upon your return?
Questioned an interested listener.
Where the determination is, the way can be found.
Dabasir replied.
I now had the determination, so I set out to find a way. First, I visited every single man to whom I was in debt. I begged for their patience until I could earn the money to repay them. Most of them met me gladly. A few of them insulted me, but others actually offered to help me. One man in particular gave me the exact help I needed. It was Mathan, the gold lender. He learned that I had been a camel tender in Syria. So, he sent me to old Nebata, the camel trader. Nebata had just been commissioned by our good king to purchase many herds of healthy camels for a great expedition. I put my knowledge of camels to very good use working with him. Gradually, I was able to repay every copper and every piece of silver. Then, at last, I could hold my head high. I finally felt that I was an honorable man among men.
Again, Dabasir turned back to his food.
Korska, you snail!
He called loudly to be heard in the kitchen.
The food is cold. Bring me more meat fresh from the roasting. Bring a very large portion for Tarkad, too. He is the son of my old friend, he is hungry, and he will eat with me.
So ended the tale of Dabasir, the camel trader of old Babylon. He found his own soul when he realized a great truth. It was a truth that had been known and used by wise men long before his time. This truth has led men of all ages out of difficulties and into success. It will continue to do so for anyone who has the wisdom to understand its magic power. It is here for any man to use who reads these lines. Where the determination is, the way can be found. The clay tablets from Babylon. St. Swithin's College. Nottingham University. Newark-on-Trent. Nottingham. Professor Franklin Caldwell. Care of British Scientific Expedition. Hilla, Mesopotamia. October 21, 1934. My dear Professor, the 5 clay tablets from your recent excavation in the ruins of Babylon arrived on the same boat as your letter. I have been completely fascinated by them. I have spent many pleasant hours translating their inscriptions. I should have answered your letter immediately, but I delayed until I could finish the attached translations. The tablets arrived without any damage, thanks to your careful use of preservatives and excellent packing. You will be just as astonished by the story they tell as we were in the laboratory. We usually expect the dim and distant past to speak of romance and adventure. You know, Arabian Nights types of stories. But instead, these tablets reveal the struggles of a person named Dabasir trying to pay off his debts. It makes you realize that conditions in this old world have not changed nearly as much in 5,000 years as you might expect. It is strange, but these ancient inscriptions really shook me up, as my students might say. As a college professor, I am supposed to be a thinking human being with a working knowledge of most subjects. Yet, here comes this old fellow straight out of the dust-covered ruins of Babylon. He offers a way to pay off my debts and acquire jingling gold in my wallet that I had never even heard of. It is a pleasant thought, and it will be very interesting to see if his method works just as well today as it did in old Babylon. Mrs. Shrewsbury and I are planning to try his plan on our own finances, which could certainly use the improvement. I wish you the best of luck in your worthy expedition. I am eagerly waiting for another opportunity to assist you, and I remain yours sincerely, Alfred H. Shrewsbury. Department of Archaeology. Tablet number 1. Now, as the moon becomes full, I, Dabasir, have just returned from slavery in Syria. I am determined to pay off my many fair debts. I want to become a wealthy man worthy of respect in my native city of Babylon. So, I am carving a permanent record of my affairs into this clay. This record will guide and help me achieve my high ambitions. Under the wise advice of my good friend Mathan, the gold lender, I am determined to follow an exact plan. He says this plan will lead any honorable man out of debt and into wealth and self-respect. This plan includes 3 purposes, which represent my hopes and desires. First, the plan provides for my future prosperity. Therefore, 1/10 of everything I earn will be set aside as my own to keep. Mathan spoke wisely when he said,
A man who keeps gold and silver in his purse that he does not need to spend is good to his family and loyal to his king. A man who has only a few coppers in his purse is indifferent to his family and indifferent to his king. But a man who has nothing in his purse is unkind to his family and disloyal to his king, because his own heart is bitter. Therefore, the man who wishes to achieve success must have coin that he can keep to jingle in his purse. This way, he will have love for his family and loyalty to his king in his heart.
Second, the plan ensures that I will support and clothe my good wife. She has loyally returned to me from her father's house. Mathan says that taking good care of a faithful wife puts self-respect into a man's heart. It also adds strength and determination to his goals. Therefore, 7/10 of all I earn will be used to provide a home, clothes to wear, and food to eat. It will also include a little extra to spend, so our lives will not lack pleasure and enjoyment. However, he strongly warned me to be extremely careful. We must not spend more than 7/10 of what I earn for these worthy purposes. The success of the plan lies right here. I must live entirely on this portion. I must never use more. I must never buy what I cannot pay for out of this share. Tablet number 2. Third, the plan ensures that my debts will be paid out of my earnings. Therefore, every time the moon is full, 2/10 of all I have earned will be divided honorably and fairly. I will distribute this among those who trusted me and to whom I owe money. This way, all my debts will surely be paid in due time. So, I am engraving here the name of every man I am indebted to, along with the honest amount of my debt. Faru, the cloth weaver, 2 silver, 6 copper. Sinjar, the couch maker, 1 silver. Ahmar, my friend, 3 silver, 1 copper. Zankar, my friend, 4 silver, 7 copper. Askamir, my friend, 1 silver, 3 copper. Haransar, the jewel maker, 6 silver, 2 copper. Dayarbekar, my father's friend, 4 silver, 1 copper. Alkahad, the house owner, 14 silver. Mathan, the gold lender, 9 silver. Bayajik, the farmer, 1 silver, 7 copper. From here on, disintegrated. Cannot be deciphered. Tablet number 3. I owe these creditors a total of 119 pieces of silver and 141 pieces of copper. I owed these sums and saw no way to repay them. In my foolishness, I allowed my wife to return to her father. I left my native city to seek easy wealth elsewhere. Instead, I only found disaster and was sold into the degradation of slavery. Now Mathan has shown me how to repay my debts in small portions of my earnings. I finally realized the great extent of my foolishness in running away from the results of my extravagant spending. Therefore, I visited my creditors. I explained to them that I have no resources to pay them, except for my ability to earn. I intend to apply 2/10 of all I earn toward my debts, dividing it evenly and honestly. This is how much I can pay, and no more. If they are patient, my obligations will eventually be paid in full. Ahmar, whom I considered my best friend, insulted me bitterly. I left him in humiliation. Bayajik, the farmer, pleaded for me to pay him first because he badly needed the help. Alkahad, the house owner, was very disagreeable. He insisted that he would cause trouble for me unless I settled my debt in full soon. All the rest willingly accepted my proposal. Because of this, I am more determined than ever to carry it through. I am convinced that it is easier to pay one's just debts than to avoid them. Even though I cannot meet the needs and demands of a few of my creditors, I will deal fairly and impartially with everyone. Tablet number 4. The moon is full again. I have worked hard with a clear mind. My good wife has supported my intention to pay my creditors. Because of our wise determination, I earned 19 pieces of silver over the past month. I made this money by buying camels with strong lungs and good legs for Nebater. I divided this money according to the plan. I set aside 1/10 to keep for myself. I gave 7/10 to my good wife to pay for our living expenses. The remaining 2/10 I divided among my creditors as evenly as possible using copper coins. I did not see Ahmar, but I left his payment with his wife. Bayerjik was so pleased that he tried to kiss my hand. Old Alkahad was the only one who grumbled. He said I must pay faster. I replied that if I was allowed to be well-fed and free of worry, that alone would help me pay him faster. All the others thanked me and praised my efforts. Therefore, at the end of 1 month, my debt is reduced by almost 4 pieces of silver. I also possess almost 2 pieces of silver of my own, which no man can claim. My heart is lighter than it has been in a very long time. The moon is full again. I worked hard, but with poor success. I was able to buy only a few camels. I earned just 11 pieces of silver. Nevertheless, my good wife and I stood by our plan. We bought no new clothing, and we ate little besides herbs. Once again, I paid ourselves 1/10 of the 11 pieces of silver, and we lived on 7/10. I was surprised when Ahmar praised my payment, even though it was small. Bayerjik did the same. Alkahad flew into a rage. However, when I told him to give back his portion if he did not want it, he accepted it. The others were content, just as before. The moon is full again, and I am filled with joy. I intercepted a fine herd of camels and bought many healthy ones. Because of this, my earnings were 42 pieces of silver. This month, my wife and I bought much-needed sandals and clothing. We also dined well on meat and fowl. We paid more than 8 pieces of silver to our creditors. Even Alkahad did not protest. The plan is truly great. It leads us out of debt and gives us wealth that is ours to keep. The moon has been full 3 times since I last carved upon this clay. Each month, I paid myself 1/10 of all I earned. My good wife and I lived on 7/10, even though it was difficult at times. And each month, I paid 2/10 to my creditors. I now have 21 pieces of silver of my own in my purse. This makes me stand tall and feel proud to walk among my friends. My wife keeps our home beautifully and is dressed elegantly. We are very happy living together. The plan is incredibly valuable. Has it not turned an ex-slave into an honorable man? Tablet number 5. The moon is full once again. I remember that it has been a long time since I last carved upon the clay. In truth, 12 months have come and gone. But I will not neglect my record today, because today I paid the last of my debts. My good wife and my thankful self will celebrate with a great feast today. We have finally achieved our goal. Many things happened during my final visit to my creditors that I will remember for a long time. Ahmar begged for my forgiveness for his unkind words. He told me that out of everyone, I was the one he most wanted as a friend. Old Alkahad is not so bad after all. He said to me,
You were once a piece of soft clay, easily pressed and molded by any hand that touched you. But now you are a piece of bronze, capable of holding a sharp edge. If you ever need silver or gold, come to me.
He is not the only one who holds me in high regard. Many others speak to me with deep respect. My good wife looks at me with a light in her eyes that gives a man true confidence in himself. Yet, it is the plan that created my success. It enabled me to pay all my debts and to jingle both gold and silver in my purse. I highly recommend it to anyone who wishes to get ahead. Truly, if this plan can enable an ex-slave to pay his debts and have gold in his purse, won't it help any man find independence? I am not finished with the plan myself. I am convinced that if I continue to follow it, it will make me a very rich man. St. Swithin's College, Nottingham University, Newark-on-Trent, Nottingham. Professor Franklin Caldwell. Care of British Scientific Expedition. Hilla, Mesopotamia. My dear Professor, November 7, 1936. If, in your further digging into those ruins of Babylon, you encounter the ghost of a former resident, an old camel trader named Dabasir, do me a favor. Tell him that his scribbling upon those clay tablets, so long ago, has earned for him the lifelong gratitude of a couple of college folks back here in England. You will possibly remember my writing a year ago that Mrs. Shrewsbury and I intended to try his plan for getting out of debt and at the same time having gold to jingle. You may have guessed, even though we tried to keep it from our friends, our desperate straits. We were frightfully humiliated for years by a lot of old debts and worried sick for fear some of the tradespeople might start a scandal that would force me out of the college. We paid and paid, every shilling we could squeeze out of income, but it was hardly enough to hold things even. Besides, we were forced to do all our buying where we could get further credit, regardless of higher costs. It developed into one of those vicious circles that grow worse instead of better. Our struggles were getting hopeless. We could not move to less costly rooms because we owed the landlord. There did not appear to be anything we could do to improve our situation. Then, here comes your acquaintance, the old camel trader from Babylon, with a plan to do just what we wished to accomplish. He really stirred us up to follow his system. We made a list of all our debts, and I took it around and showed it to everyone we owed. I explained how it was simply impossible for me to ever pay them the way things were going along. They could readily see this themselves from the figures. Then I explained that the only way I saw to pay in full was to set aside 20% of my income each month to be divided proportionally. This would pay them in full in a little over 2 years. I added that, in the meantime, we would go on a cash basis and give them the further benefit of our cash purchases. They were really quite decent. Our greengrocer, a wise old man, put it in a way that helped to bring around the rest.
If you pay for all you buy and then pay some on what you owe, that is better than you have done, for you haven't paid down the account at all in 3 years.
Finally, I secured all their names to an agreement binding them not to bother us as long as the 20% of our income was paid regularly. Then we began scheming on how to live upon 70%. We were determined to keep that extra 10% to jingle. The thought of silver and possibly gold was most alluring. It was like having an adventure to make the change. We enjoyed figuring this way and that, to live comfortably upon that remaining 70%. We started with rent and managed to secure a fair reduction. Next, we put our favorite brands of tea and such under suspicion and were agreeably surprised how often we could purchase superior qualities at less cost. It is too long a story for a letter, but anyhow it did not prove difficult. We managed, and right cheerfully at that. What a relief it proved to have our affairs in such a shape that we were no longer persecuted by past due accounts. I must not neglect, however, to tell you about that extra 10% we were supposed to jingle. Well, we did jingle it for some time. Now don't laugh too soon. You see, that is the sporty part. It is the real fun, to start accumulating money that you do not want to spend. There is more pleasure in running up such a surplus than there could be in spending it. After we had jingled to our heart's content, we found a more profitable use for it. We took up an investment upon which we could pay that 10% each month. This is proving to be the most satisfying part of our regeneration. It is the first thing we pay out of my check. There is a most gratifying sense of security to know our investment is growing steadily. By the time my teaching days are over, it should be a snug sum, large enough so the income will take care of us from then on. All this out of my same old check. It is difficult to believe, yet absolutely true. All our debts are being gradually paid, and at the same time our investment is increasing. Besides, we get along financially even better than before. Who would believe there could be such a difference in results between following a financial plan and just drifting along? At the end of the next year, when all our old bills will have been paid, we will have more to pay upon our investment, besides some extra for travel. We are determined never again to permit our living expenses to exceed 70% of our income. Now you can understand why we would like to extend our personal thanks to that old man whose plan saved us from our hell on earth. He knew. He had been through it all. He wanted others to benefit from his